Hello everyone and welcome back. So we start a new series today on your request. You wanted to have more information about each card, so that's what I'm gonna try today. One video, one card, because there's quite a lot to say for each card. Right, so let's start today with Le Mat. Le Mat is also called the Fool. I chose that card because we have already seen it in previous videos, and I thought maybe start with something that you already know a little bit. Now, it is also considered the first card. It's not the first card because there is no number, so it is not number one, but it is representing a little bit that person, that joker, so your soul, who starts something new. You can also place it at the end of the game when you put them in order, you know, from 1 to 21. Then he would kind of represent the one who has already taken all that path, that spiritual path, who has reached enlightenment and now goes on and teaches others. So this is really in a very spiritual sense. For example, if you read Jodorowsky, that would be a little bit what you would read, because he really goes into higher than spiritual you cannot do. Bless him, he is really great, but it's not always very easy to understand him. The Fool represents also the law of movement and the archetype of the poet, so the artist. So if you had to summarize it in a couple of keywords, I would go for freedom and liberation, and I would go for moving on, evolution and detachment. That's more than a couple, but yeah, this is what the Fool represents in his essence, really. So if you wish to grasp a little bit this energy of the Fool, you could imagine someone who is maybe like a late teenager or someone in his 20s, in the sense that he is someone who is detached. He has no commitments, he has no responsibilities, he goes into the world because he walks towards the right, so towards the future and out there. He follows his own ideas, his own vision of the world, and he detaches a little bit from, not quite a lot actually, from the old. You know, what the parents say, that's not okay. What the society says, that's old. I'm gonna create a new world and move on. That is also shown by his hat. So he has a hat that covers his ears. That means that he doesn't listen. He is concentrating on his vision and going towards that. Now, we have seen the cards have always two poles. So you have the positive side and you have the negative side. On a negative aspect with those same examples would be that he's someone who doesn't listen to anyone. So he doesn't also get advice. He is not, you know, there are people who have experience in life, and there are people who were like him at some point, and who did mistakes, and why don't you learn from them? But he just moves on, and he doesn't even want to listen. So this is a little bit also the energy of that Fool. Now, he's also an artist, and what does it mean? So he's definitely marginal. He is someone who thinks differently than the rest of the society. So I would also kind of compare him to a hippie. I don't know why, but you know, those hippies that in 1969 had that revolution. He is definitely a revolutionary. He wants to create something new, and they also fought against all those very tight structures of society back then, you know, saying women have to be like that and men have to be like that, and you don't have sex or you don't talk about sex. And that's exactly what they wanted to change. You know, yes, let's talk about sex, and let's dress very unconventionally, and completely overrule those conventions. Now, coming back to that, I would say late teenager, he's also a little bit marginal. He tries to be different, like every artist is as well. So you would have bells on the belt, you would have ripped clothes, you know, you would attract attention maybe at some point, but it is, an artist really lives that. The artist really, he doesn't do that so that people look at him. He does it because he wants to be different. He wants to be a rebel somehow. Yeah, so the artist is also someone who is sometimes misunderstood. So that can also be an energy. In a more negative side, we could say that he is a dreamer. He walks through life and doesn't really know where he wants to go. That would be a little bit of the negative side. And because he doesn't want to listen to anyone, you know, he's a bit stubborn. Yeah, I mean, the same thing, he has that hat covering his ears. Some say that's an astronaut helmet, because he is in the stars. He is in the clouds. He lives up there, and always having those visions, and therefore he cannot be very grounded. He flees from everything that could put him chains on. So no commitments, no responsibility. It would, for example, not be someone who dreams of a life with buying a house, getting married, having a dog and a great car. That would not be the Fool at all. So also, for example, things like finances are not necessarily his forte. He does live with little. He doesn't need much. Like an artist, you know, prefers to be well and do something that he's passionate about, rather than having a lot of money and the conventional life, the common life. Further, I would say he is someone who does not dwell in the past. He is someone who moves on and leaves the past behind. He has the experiences in his little bag, but that's all he takes. So for instance, as a boyfriend, he would not be someone who talks a lot about his past life. He wouldn't talk about his ex-girlfriends or boyfriends. He wouldn't compare you either so much with previous ones. He really makes a cut with the past and moves on. So in the context of work, for instance, he would, as we said, rather be someone doing a job where he is creative, probably where he is alone, a freelancer, someone independent, or maybe someone a little bit introverted behind his desk and not, you know, not very good team player, I would say. Not necessarily, but this could come. It's this energy of someone who rather does things alone, has his ideas and carries them out. On the contrary as well, he could be a very eccentric person of the group. Remember the bells, the ripped jeans. So he could be the one, for instance, that is different, that people say, well, that's a strange guy, but he's really funny, or oh, he always has the right jokes. Okay, he can also stand out and be marginal in a positive sense, you know, just being different and not as anyone else, not the common guy. It can also represent, for instance, someone who wants to retire because he wants to leave, he wants to evolve. Or it could also represent, on the contrary, someone who wants to be the boss, someone who is trying to get a promotion, because the Fool wants to evolve. He wants to leave something behind and go towards something new, something that will enrich him. Now, in the same sense as a lover, for instance, I would rather, well, it depends, but in the positive sense, you would say it's someone with a vision, it's someone, and then it also depends in what position he is. Does he walk away from you or does he walk towards you? Or she. So there's a lot of context necessary. You need to see the card always in correlation with others, or giving it a certain intention, which we will see later. Yeah, it can also say, this guy is not gonna stay. He's someone, he's a free bird and it's difficult to put him in a cage. That could also be something. It could also mean, does this guy have a contract in Singapore for 2 years? It seems to me that he is leaving. He is detaching from you because probably he's leaving. And then the person would say, oh, actually, yeah, he has a contract in Paris. I don't know, something like that. That can also be the meaning. So you need context for that. On the negative side, as in if it was a lover, women or men, I would say the difficult thing is it could be either that you have to ground that person very much, so you have to take the role a little bit of a parent, who's constantly dragging him back from his cloud back to earth. There are bills to be paid. You have commitments. Well, maybe, I don't know, you have children, you probably wouldn't have children because that's too much responsibility for him. But, you come back. So this is a little bit the role that you might have. You can also have, on the contrary, a role where you are very alone. Right, so we have seen the positive sides, the negative sides of the card. We haven't seen yet the inverted. So the inverted is not the negative side of the card. It can mean something very different, but it definitely means that it is not well lived and not well experienced, that there is some blockage there. So law of movement and the artist, the evolution, the moving on, the detachment, what can be the blockage by that. And for the Fool, I would say, being completely stuck. So if he's inverted, he does not move on. He doesn't know how. He's someone who walks in circles, who is lost. So that's also why we talk a little bit of Alzheimer. He has that hat. He lives in his own world. He is stuck in his cloud, or in this helmet that we saw, completely disconnected. It's a card of disconnection, of despair, of depression, of course. He could also be entangled, still with something from the past that he doesn't know how to get out. And because we talked about detachment, he can definitely also represent inverted, someone who is completely stuck in the past, that he doesn't know how to get out of there. He's not able to detach from some experience, from some event, and that leads him to depression. In the terms of health, we can see that as well. He would represent the nervous system. He would also represent, for instance, an emboli. I've never had that in a drawing, but could be, and it gives you a little bit that feeling for the card. And he would represent a coma, of course, because he's not moving, he's not going anywhere. So just for you to see how in all those contexts, love, work, health, you have to grasp that energy and adapt it. I would like to show you some examples in context, because it is very different to see it like that. So as I told you, the context is very important, and it's also important what the person tells you. They can be wrong as well. I mean, if a mother comes because she has a problem with her son, she can have a false idea as well of what the problem is, but even that can help. So you need a little bit of information there. The other thing that is very important is of course the intention. I put the card here because it represents you, or it represents your son, or it represents the advice that the tarot gives, or it represents the obstacle, or it represents I don't know, the resources, the skills you have that will help you in that process. So of course it will depend what intention you give the card to see also different meanings popping up. So let's see that concretely. For example, in this drawing, context would be, I don't know, the girl just met someone, she is, you know, starting to fall in love and so on. Well, you can see the guy is definitely leaving. So he's detaching from her. Why? I don't know. You know, and then you talk, you have a conversation, of course, with that person. That's what I like most actually about tarot, is that conversation that you have with, you know, it's just, you know, I'm opening the cards and telling you the future. No, there is an exchange, and the tarot gives me a little bit of wisdom to help the person to maybe understand something. And as we said, he could also represent a trip. You know, the guy has some luggage on his shoulders and he is walking. So that can also represent a trip. So maybe this guy is just a tourist or he is someone who has, as we said, a contract in Paris for 2 years. So but he's definitely moving, he's leaving. Right, then we can also have this card, for instance, in the position of the conflict. What is the conflict I have with my boyfriend or my girlfriend? And maybe I would say, well, you know, I think he or she is very scared to get married and lose his or her freedom. We could also say, well, he's not responsible enough. That could also be. If the card is in the position of the advice, I think I would say, you know, walk away. It doesn't bring you any growth. There is nothing there for you to gain. That would be, for instance, what this would represent in the position of an advice. As a resource, as a skill, well, sometimes when people are a little bit down, you have to get them up, to lift them a little bit. And so I also like to put a card and say, well, what skills do you have? We have talked about the problem, we have talked about the obstacles, we have talked about the advice. Well, great, that's what you should do, but what are your skills? You know, what do you bring with it? And in that case, it would be, well, look, you have the skill to not dwell on the past, and well, then you know, move on and rise from the ashes. That's what you do, and that's what you do best. So this would be the resource. As an obstacle or some way of maybe sabotaging myself or yourself, I would probably say, girl, stop running away from things, face things. So that would be probably what would come out in that kind of context. If a mother comes for her child, well, there are many things, and that happens actually quite a lot. I would go for something like either, well, he's immature. How old is he? You know, tell me. Oh, he's 12. Oh, well, you know. It can also mean that, you know, he needs to detach from the mother or from home. Maybe he needs that trip with his grandfather because he needs a little bit of manlyhood. So let him go, you know, or I don't know, or maybe he wants to go to a different country to study, and she's scared of that. Well, but this is what will make him grow. This is where he is gonna evolve. If though the card represents the mother in such constellation, I would say, well, maybe you have very high expectations of your son. You live in an ideal world. You have your vision of the world, which is maybe not the vision that your son has. So, you know, to learn that my way is not necessarily the way of others. Right, so I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something. If you have questions, please comment. If you liked it, please thumbs up, of course, so that we can spread our knowledge to more people, and share to anyone who would benefit from that. And we will see each other pretty soon with the next card. I think I'm gonna start with number 1. I think I'm gonna go with the Magician next time, but I don't promise anything. So have a good night and goodbye.